English language teaching. Under the covers.
Hello and welcome to ELT Under the Covers Teaching Masters, where we take inspiration from educational figures outside of the classroom and we bring them to you, and we kind of go in depth and see what is it about them that makes them such masterful teachers. But first, introductions. I'm Neil, a team teacher.
Hello everybody, it's Professor Rich.
Today we are looking at Richard Feynman. We've got a short intro video, but I just wanted to ask you briefly, if or what do you know about Richard Feynman?
Zero.
Yeah,
Other than the fact you said he's related to the film that's come out by Christopher Nolan, then I would assume he has something to do with the atomic bomb.
Yes, he helped create the atomic bomb. He helped do a lot of things, and he was a certified genius. And
What is a certified genius?
in that, he's recognized within his academic field, and
Right.
also generally in the wider populace, and it's
Right.
not just the case of like he's won a Nobel Prize, which he has, but he's just got a litany of these amazing achievements, and people don't seem to kind of realize that a lot of it gets tied to him. Like a lot of the basics of string theory, are based on his diagrams, which I'm not sure if that's what he won the Nobel Prize for, or if that was his work on the Manhattan Project and the bomb, which is related to that Oppenheimer Nolan, or if it's the Feynman technique, for education. People might have heard of that and then go, oh wait, that's the same guy that did the nuclear stuff, and did all the diagrams. That's the same, all of the. I'm like, yeah, this is all the same guy, and that's just like 3 things that he's done, and he's done like loads more other things as well. He's got an incredible autobiography that's called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, which is kind of like an autobiography, but it's also kind of just like, I don't know, it's an eclectic mix of his stories of his life with, and it's pretty funny. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a joke, but it's
got a good
worth
title, to be fair.
That's
what I want to call my. I want to call that my autobiography as well. Surely you're joking, Professor Rich.
That's going to be on my grave. So. But maybe this is a good point to kind of jump in and get ourselves a refresher for myself, because I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff, but also the viewers and listeners about who Richard Feynman was and why he is, in my estimation, so impressive. Richard Feynman, a genius, a Nobel Prize winning physicist, professor of theoretical physics at California Institute of Technology, Caltech, creator of the Feynman technique learning method, a dad, and a master teacher. A little bit of a summary. I forgot. He's also a teacher as well, and he's not just taught. He taught at Caltech. He taught at a bunch of different places. He also did some teaching abroad as well. He taught in Brazil, and there's so much to talk about with him. Well, I think we are mostly focused on the teaching aspect, so I think next off we should just have him explain to us what it is about teaching and how he goes about teaching, and his philosophy behind that, unless you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share.
I mean, I think the learning and the teaching, I've always, I think learning and teaching go hand in hand for a teacher as well, not just as the student learning and the teacher teaching, but I think that learning yourself, I think a teacher should always be a learner. I don't want to sound all happy clappy and hippie and bullshit, but I think a teacher should always be a learner, because it gives you insights into how people learn. And although we can accept actually also that learning is individual and people learn in different ways, trying to learn something, it does give you that student perspective. And it's important even to sit in classrooms sometimes as a learner and get that experience as well. And language class, if you're a language teacher, learning Spanish was invaluable to me, give me insights into all the difficulties and stuff. Before that, I would just be writing grammatical stuff on the board and wondering why the students didn't get it. You have to go through that frustration yourself to understand what is going on for the students. So I think that, yeah, it's connected, isn't it? So we are also interested in how he learns as well as how he teaches.
And luckily enough, we have his technique, which goes into detail on how he does that, and we'll look at that later. But first, these are a couple of clips from some interviews that he did, and he goes over his classroom philosophy, and I think you'll find it quite interesting.
Let's hear him explain his approach to teaching.
All those students are in the class.
You have sound now.
Yeah.
How should I best teach them? Should I teach them from the point of view of the history side, from the applications? My theory is that the best way to teach is to have no philosophy, is to be chaotic and confused in the sense that you use every possible way of doing it. That's the only way I can see to answer it, so as to catch this guy or that guy on different hooks as you go along. That during the time when the fellow who was interested in history is being bored by the abstract mathematics, on the other hand, the fellow who likes the abstraction is being bored at another time by the history. If you can do it so you don't bore them all the time, perhaps you're better off. I really don't know how to do it. I don't know how to answer this question of different kinds of minds with different kinds of interests. What hooks them on? What makes them interested? How do you direct them to become interested? One way is by a kind of force. You have to pass this course. You have to take that examination. It's a very effective way. Many people go through schools that way. This may be the more effective way. I'm sorry, after many, many years of trying to teach and trying all different kinds of methods, I really don't know how to do it.
He's a genius. He's a genius. He's a genius. He is. Just listening to him, I'm like, yeah, fucking 100% agree with basically everything he just said. And the way that he's talking about it, you're just like, yeah. I mean, even for something like that, I really got a feel that
he's tried to understand it, and he's tried loads of different ways, and he's just kind of given up, and this is what he does. He just tries to hit all the points.
Yeah, but I think there's genius in that.
Yeah, 100%.
Because it's like anti-dogmatic, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're not like, oh, I've got the best way. It's like, no, actually what I'm going to accept is that there isn't the best way.
Yeah. Yeah. He expands on it in the biography as well, in that he talks about being very cognizant of like when he's in the classroom, that he's approaching things from multiple different ways, because he refers to it as something like inputs. We've got many different inputs, so he tries to hit all the inputs. I kind of read that as like he's talking about in terms of, do we talk about the history, the application, the theory, what have you. But also I think you could interpret that as kind of like he did lots of visuals, because he's very known for his diagrams, but he also, the way that he talks in classroom as well, like he'll go through parts where he's serious, and then he quips and makes jokes and tells bits of stories. He would regularly bring bongos into his class, and like he just randomly play those and stuff. So it's just like it's like he's MTV as a teacher. It's like a person that's just an avatar for like TikTok before TikTok became a thing. It's just bam, 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 bam. Just a whirlwind. You're just like, what is going on here? I don't find this interesting. Wait, no, this is interesting. No, I don't think it's like a roller coaster. And that's how some of his class students would describe it. Like, he's this crazy teacher, and I think what they're saying is just this teacher that's so dynamic that, you know, you can't help but just be sucked in. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. I can identify with some of that.
Yeah. It's
Okay, I mean,
ilk.
ultimately, he's really focusing a lot on engagement, and one of the ways he's using he's getting high engagement is by being unpredictable and novel, and doing things which are interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of bongos sounds quite interesting. I've done weird stuff in class before. Funnily enough, I've never done a musical thing. I've always thought about having my guitar and hiding it, you know. So
Which
just
is funny
suddenly I
because
just
you're very
whip it out
musical.
and then start going ding a ling. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's something that's been in my head.
He was talking about
just-
his guitar there, by the way.
It's one of those. It's one of those things where you have to in order to do that, you have to take your guitar to the school, to the college or whatever, and I think when I do things like that, it tends to be a bit more spontaneous than that. It's not as planned. So the idea of taking the guitar to the college, it might be like by the time I get to the college, I decide actually this isn't going to work. I'm going to do something else.
Yeah.
So yeah, because especially
I
for
just
that
find
kind
that
of stuff.
the idea of doing a lot of different, you know, laying a lot of different hooks, as he says, within his classes and lessons, you know, it sounds very exhausting and it's very interesting. But I always kind of think back and think, oh well, I did that, but I did it just to kind of focus, because I thought of the class as like one thing. I'm like, okay, I've got a bunch of guys, you know, lads here. They're 15. I know they're into StarCraft. I'll kind of integrate kind of like that stuff into the class and connect that way. Or, you know, I've got younger kids, they're in Asia. I know they're gonna like Doraemon or Dragon Ball or something like that. I'll do that. But, you know, the idea of having it multiple different layers, multiple different hooks for different students, all at the same time in this multifaceted classroom to try and get all of them. I'm like, whoa, geez, how do you even do that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a challenge of being a teacher, isn't it? In a way, you
Yeah.
can't be perfect, which is probably what he's saying
Yeah.
at the start there. Just try your best, but being dynamic and interesting, trying new things. It's good.
And I think there's a clip that we can look at that he's not teaching,
Oh,
but
fantastic.
it's talking about his parenting, because it's his kids talking about parenting. I think also him talking about parenting as well, and I think it gives an actually a deeper insight as to his thoughts behind that classroom dynamic that they came up with. So maybe we can have a look at that.
I got a kick when I was a boy of my father telling me things, so I tried to tell my son things that were interesting about the world.
He was an excellent father, always up to explain things or do things, and we would go on walks after dinner, my father and I, and talk about things, and it was, you know, it was wonderful and delightful. I'd ask him about things, and he'd try to explain them. Physics and math and history and politics and science fiction and life, the universe, and everything. I'm very lucky that I got to do that 2 or 3 times a week. Say, let's go for a walk. Sure.
I got a kick when I was a boy of my father telling me things, so I tried to tell my son things that were interesting about the world. When he was very small, I used to rock him to bed, you know, when he goes to bed. I'd tell him stories, and I'd make up story about little people that were about so high, would walk along. They would go on picnics or something. They lived in the ventilator, and they'd go through these woods, which had great, big, long, tall, blue things like trees, but without leaves and only one stalk.
So he invented the
all
borrowers and
walk
combined it
between
with
them.
The Hobbit.
You gradually catch on, that was the rug, the nap of the rug, the blue rug. And he loved this game because I would describe all these things from an odd point of view.
Wait for it.
And he liked to hear the stories. And we got all kinds of wonderful things. He even went into a moist cave where the wind kept going in and out. It was coming in cool and went out warm and so on. It was inside the dog's nose that they went. And then, of course, I could tell him all about physiology by this way and so on. And he loved that, and so I told him lots of stuff, and I enjoyed it because I was telling him stuff that I liked, and we had fun when he would guess what it was and so on. And then I have a daughter, and I tried the same thing. Well, my daughter's personality was different. She didn't want to hear the story. She wanted the story that was in the book repeated again and read to her. She wanted me to read to her, not to make up stories. And that's a different personality. And so if I were to say a very good method for teaching children about science is to make up these stories of a little people, it doesn't work at all on my daughter. It happened to work on my son, okay?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
you see
it's
it.
personalized learning there. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things, that's one of those things where people are like, this is the best way, this is the best way, this is the best way. And I have a thing that I tell my students about learning languages where I say that all roads lead to Rome, but some roads are better for some people.
Yeah.
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 So
Some people
everything's
need the
going to
struggle,
work
some people need
eventually,
it
but
easy,
different it's horses for courses, isn't it? 100%.
Exactly. And and you know, he's just, you know, he's come up with this is his own philosophy. It's not like he's, you know, gone to school to learn how to be a teacher, or this is the pedagogy that he's come to. And you know, another reason as to why I think he's a genius, but I think maybe now would be the best time to actually look at some of his teaching, because, you know, he did some videos going over, you know, what he knows about as in physics for the broader population. And you know, they're a bit old now, but I think they can kind of give us a further insight into what that looked like in class.
Feynman's reputation as a communicator of science was spreading around the world. In the early 1960s, he began presenting lectures for the public, which were televised.
Probability and uncertainty, the quantum mechanical view of nature.
Yeah, I'm all about it.
I'm going to discuss how we would look for a new law. In general, we look for a new law by the following process. First, we guess it. Then we well, don't laugh, that's really true. Then we compute the consequences of the guess. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. In that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your guess is. It doesn't make a difference how smart you are, who made the guess, or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it.
Oh, so we don't have a lot of him teaching, unfortunately.
There's longer clips and stuff like that. But yeah, that was just kind of, I feel like that encapsulated that his style. I know it's still lecturing, and I know we're very like, but the way that he approaches it, I think that was a succinct little clip to demonstrate.
It wasn't
that.
entirely one way, was it? He got the laugh and he commented on the laugh. So there was some interactivity, as much as it, you know, it was, yeah, chalk and talky.
Yeah, he's got that idea of, I know what you're thinking, and you know, and being attentive to his audience. So he does treat it more like an entertainment medium, but you could tell that going to one of his classes, you would learn.
Yeah, and you'd be really you'd be fascinated.
Yeah.
And that's really the key.
Yeah. And now, you mentioned at the beginning of this video that you were interested in, well, how does he learn? And he's actually famous for the Feynman technique, named after himself, of course. And that's how he learns. And also, it's kind of, in a way, how he teaches as well. We saw in that clip, he was very... He didn't want to over-explain. You know, when he's talking, he was basically explaining the scientific method there. We make a guess, we do an experiment. If the experiment doesn't work, the guess is wrong. If it works, then the guess is right. And, you know, maybe that could become a theory and probably yada yada.
Yeah.
So his technique is very much like that. So we've got one final clip where I talk about this Feynman technique, and you can kind of see how he does that learning and teaching at the same time.
The Feynman technique for teaching and communication is a mental model to convey information using concise thoughts and simple language. It follows a few simple steps. Step 1, choose a subject and study it. Step 2, teach it to an imaginary child. Step 3, review and identify any gaps in your understanding. Step 4, refine, simplify, and tell a story. Basically, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
It's quite interesting because it reminds me a little bit of the plastic platypus with the imaginary child.
Yeah.
Just with a few extra bits put
It's basically it.
Yeah. It's kind of, it's similar to it.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting if, I imagine that his book breaks it down a little bit more, perhaps.
He tries to see things as simply as they can be seen. He's very, it's less, the thing that he focuses on is the understanding and making sure that he understands something well. And that method is more to make sure that he understands. And I think I've talked about this in one of the previous episodes that we've done, in that when he went to Brazil and he was teaching physics there, he would get these classes and he wouldn't get much interaction with the classes, and he'd do exams and tests, and they do well in them. But if you'd ask a question to a student, they wouldn't know that answer. Or but if he asked a question and he'd say, what is spectrum light, or whatever, spectrum of light, or they would give a textbook answer. It was basically like verbatim. But then he would ask them like, well, you see this light is coming through the window, yet if we were to change the direction, what happens to the light? And they wouldn't be able to really, they'd be lost. Right. It's like, well, you've just told me, explained about light spectrums, yet I'm asking you to apply it, and they don't know how. So it reminds me of stuff like the what is it, Your Baby Can Read, and those sort of kids things where they put like images on the screen and you do the flashcards with your kids, and they see the bed, they see the text, and they start to say bed, and you're like, well, okay, there we go. They said the word bed, but you then ask them to look at bed and say what that is. They won't know, or something that's different to a different idea of what a bed is, that's not close to the picture, and then they're like, I don't know. Because they're just memorizing what it is. Yeah, they're not truly understanding, and that was his main thing, was to really be able to understand something and be able to apply it, and do it in different ways. Make sure that there's no gaps in that understanding, and then try to explain that and tell that preferably in a story.
Yeah, so it's that idea of teasing out understanding, isn't it? You wanted to really get down to the understanding of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's key, because and that's probably been one of my experiences with learning and with teaching, is that it's really about understanding and testing that understanding in different situations. That often needs a lot of context with language teaching, and it's a lot of trial and error.
Yeah. And it is true that teaching something does help you to understand it. And I think there's a lot of reasons why that is. But one of them is because you do have to understand it to not look like an idiot. And then on top of that, it's the fact you're getting that reflection, revision, engagement. There's like loads of qualities of teaching which contribute to your learning of the subject matter. It's quite ironic, really, but it is what happens. It feeds a little bit into that idea of teachers as experts. It's really that the teachers become experts necessarily, unless they're really bad teachers, because you have to keep understanding more and more one way or another.
Yeah, and the more and the deeper understanding that you have, the more that you can use and apply your understanding in a broader context. And I struggle to come up with examples, but the one that just came to mind is the other day, my oldest son, he discovered nettles. Got nettles, or like all around his hands, and he's like, it really stings and stuff like that, and you were like, stop crying like a girl. Exactly. So I just slapped him about. No. So someone was like, we need to find some dock leaves, and I'm like, okay, yeah, dock leaves work, but I don't see any dock leaves around nettles. I know there's supposed to be the idea of, if there's a poison, then there's generally the antidote close by, but there wasn't. It was just in our back garden. So he's got nettles, and I'm like, well, nettles, the stuff in the nettles, it's acidic, right? So I'm like, it just needs some alkaline. And like, well, what's like, we can just use baking soda or vinegar or something like that. But they're like, no, we need dock leaves. I'm like, no, you don't specifically need dock leaves. You need something that balances and counters this, because that's probably what dock leaves are doing. Maybe they've got some alkaline property to it, right? But so we were able to come up with a bit of a paste. I think, I can't remember toothpaste. What we used.
Toothpaste would work.
It might have been toothpaste. No, we made a paste of some sort with combination of stuff, and it seemed to reduce it, and it helped. I don't know if it was a mental thing, that often is more of a mental thing than anything, but it reminds me of that. It's just like, this idea that if you just learn it on a surface level, that you're talking about the future, or you're talking about the past, it means you always use the past simple. You talk about the future, you always use will. I'm like, no, we both know it's not that simple, is it? And the more ways that you kind of learn, and more that you understand what you're trying to do, the more ways that you can, present that language, or you present those ideas.
Yeah, I think that was a perfect example, really, actually. That idea that, we need dock leaves. It's like, no, you don't need dock leaves. That's kind of the difference, isn't it, between regurgitation and understanding. And we see it a lot. It's funny, we're going to have to do our ChatGPT analysis at some point, but this is one of the things that I see with ChatGPT is people kind of seeing something and then repeating it and going, oh, wow, that's so good. And it's like, but that's not how you use it. You don't just see something that someone does and then just repeat what they do again. Like, I don't know, someone sees someone say, read this and summarize it. And then they just paste an article in. And then they're like, wow, ChatGPT is so good. And then that's what they use it for.
Yeah.
Exactly that, every single time. And that's a bad prompt in and of itself, because it gives way too much ambiguity to the model to do all kinds of stuff with it, but someone thinks that that's magic and that's it. Oh yes, ChatGPT, that's the thing that can read articles and summarize them for me. I had someone the other day who seemed like quite a smart guy. It was a mobile phone repair shop, and he I mentioned something about ChatGPT, and he said, oh yeah, it's good, isn't it, for people who are lonely, because they can like talk to it. Oh, that's going to be great for them in the future. And he was like saying it as if that's the only thing it does.
Yeah.
Because I mentioned, oh yeah, I'm really into ChatGPT, and he's like, oh yeah, it's good for lonely people, that thing. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, it could be. That could be one of the uses, but that's like saying that, the use of a Swiss Army knife is peeling potatoes. Oh yeah, Swiss Army knife, that's useful for peeling potatoes. Yeah, has anyone got the potato peeler? The Swiss Army knife. It's like that's what I'm seeing there. So it's that kind of idea. It's a shame, isn't it? I think constantly And I don't know whether some people are just incapable of learning critical thinking or something, or whether it's something that happens from the system. But, it's like a constant theme in education is that we need to teach people to be more creative, critical thinking, think outside the box, problem solving, judging for themselves, thinking through things themselves, working based on principles rather than rules, guiding the knowledge rather than just learning line by line what something is. And I heard it once said, yeah, what is it? The mind is not a vessel to be filled. It is a fire to be kindled. Is that idea? And we need more of that. And it seems like this idea of focusing on understanding is a way of getting down to that.
Yeah. If anything with Richard Feynman is that and his dynamicism, my words have lost meaning. His dynamic abilities to engage and his understanding is what truly encapsulates a masterful educator and teacher. And I'd love to see more of that. How you would teach that, I think, would be using more of that deep understanding, engaging. But that means standardizing. But as you say, that's kind of often the antithesis of that, because it doesn't exactly kindle the fire, it just fills the bucket.
I think one thing to say is that standardization is never permanent. There's too much of this idea of permanence. I could get really annoyed about this actually if I got into it. But this idea that, this is, I don't even know if I even dare say it, but the science. It's such a horrible thing to say. It's like, are you insane to think that you found the permanent science? Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah. You're better than 3 billion years of human development. I see. You've got it all figured out now.
Yeah.
No, it's not how things work. There is no permanence. It's always adapting, changing, getting better, getting more accurate, finding the new theory that's better. That's how it works. And I think that's what he's getting to with his pedagogy.
Yeah.
It's kind of saying, look, there's not going to ever be a best way.
Yeah.
It's more about the mindset and the approach than it is to say, this is how you teach, always.
I think that's an absolutely wonderful way to end this. Those that are listening, those that are watching, what do you think? What did you think of Richard Feynman? Do you have any stories that you want to share about him? Do you have anyone that you think is a teaching master that we should look at, that we should cover? Please leave a comment below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Rich, would you like to leave any final thoughts that you might have on Richard Feynman or anything else?
Well, one of the things that did strike me about him is the personality dimension of openness. And it is sometimes the case that someone who's very high in intellect is also high in creativity. I think that's definitely the case for him. He seems like someone who's a very creative individual. And at the start of this, you spoke about all of the different areas that he'd gone into and the things that he'd developed. And it does seem to be quite wide ranging, although primarily in physics. The guy obviously also had something to say about pedagogy and education. And even his development.
Actually, in his book, he talked about when he had his summers or worked in different places, he would go and, when he had time off, he would go into the biology department and work in there, or he would go into other different areas and just like kind of hang out and work and kind of try and understand what's going on there and see if it's something that he could offer to that.
Right. Yeah. So that's that idea, isn't it, of always wanting to open Pandora's box to find out what the unknown is, to be fascinated by new and different areas and keep exploring. And, in a kind of ironic and peculiar way, that's probably what led someone who's clearly a positive, optimistic humanist to end up participating in the development of something as catastrophic as the atomic bomb. It's the thing that if you are someone who always opens Pandora's box, eventually you'll open the Pandora's box which enables someone to create a devastating weapon. And, you know, I think that is an unfortunate but necessary risk that we have to have in kind of a free exploration, a society where we encourage people to be critical thinkers and we encourage people to question the doctrine, you know, because if you had it another way where you said, no, the way to learn is to listen to what the teacher says 100%, go along with it and don't question it, then you could easily just have the teacher say like, oh, don't play with atomic physics because that's dangerous and bad, right? That's it. Then you stop all of that. We're never going to have an atomic bomb then. And you might say, well, that's good. But then we're also not going to have all of the great things that we get from that. That's, in a way, what we're seeing, what I'm getting at here is kind of it's a parable of freedom itself. It's that when the more freedom you give, the more risk there will be for these really terrible things, but also you'll get all the great things. And I think that's the way that we're supposed to be as humans. The way we're supposed to learn is through this creative discovery, question everything, critical thinking, and all the rest of it. And I think that, particularly as teachers, we should stand for that. That's what we want to be. If there definitely are people out there who say, no, this is right and this is wrong, and that's what we need to teach, you know, even to the extent of saying, for example, that there is one way of looking at World War II, and this is it. And then they say whatever they say. I'm not going to go into details, but whatever you want to say about World War II, to say that there's one way of saying it, there are people who believe in that way of doing things. And in my opinion, when someone is being like that in that particular area, because maybe they don't necessarily do it everywhere, but in that particular area, they act like that, they're not being a teacher. As far as I'm concerned, that's not teaching. To say to someone, this is the way of this thing. That's not teaching. You can call it something else. In my opinion, it's not teaching by rich definition. Okay. You're doing something else. Teachers is all about encouraging people to question, providing people with the evidence so they can make up their own mind and even maybe question the evidence. I mean, it's just the evidence as far as this person, and this person says, right?
Yeah.
But of course, there is a balance, because there's a balance of pragmatism versus, you know, reality. So when you teach someone about gravity, maybe you don't want to spend loads of time saying that, well, maybe it's not gravity, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, because people just maybe want the utility of knowing how to calculate the speed that something falls down. So it's a balance. Yeah. But yeah, I can't stand that singular dogmatism of this is the reality.
Wonderful. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll be delving into more of these teaching masters in the future. If you're looking for more information from myself, you can go to teamteacherchina.com. We've got a whole bunch of materials, PowerPoints that you can use instantly in the classroom. We've got a Team Teacher China YouTube channel where we have videos teaching you how to use those materials. Team Teacher English, where we put those materials into a video form for self-study. And Team Teacher Baby, where I take my experience as a teacher and put that into parenting.
And go to youtube.com/Professor Rich to see some English teaching. You can catch me weekly live streams on Oxford Online English YouTube channel. Oh, and also you can do a YouTube search for POG Space UK, and you would get my alpha version of my new gaming channel, which actually just have some trial content on there at the moment. You can email us here at eltunderthecovers@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to contribute to the show.
Smash that like button, share and subscribe.
And watch 100% of the video and don't click off. Thank you.
Bye.